With the war in Ukraine going on right now and the whole world watching from a distance, the only thing we have left to ask ourselves is, what will happen to Ukraine and its economy? In this video, we will be talking about the impact the war has had on Ukraine's economy and people. This is one of the toughest videos I've had to make. On the one hand, Ukraine's been involuntarily caught up in this conflict, and it's one of the clearest examples of good versus evil. It would never have happened in the last century, though, so it's kind of sad how things have changed. I want to be able to tell you a story of how Ukraine cast off its Soviet shackles and is becoming a strong and efficient first world economy. Unfortunately, I can't because it's simply not true before the second Russian invasion of 2022. Ukraine was already one of Europe's poorer countries even before 2014. Internal failures and external pressures have played a role here. Unfortunately, many of these pressures are coming from Moscow. Before these more blatant acts of aggression, wherever the finger of blame has pointed. Before the video starts, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Country people were vulnerable before the invasion. It doesn't matter how you spell it though, because they're spelled the same way and mean the same thing. I think it's great to hear about Ukraine's victories over the Russians, but sometimes we need to be wary of getting too distracted by it. The reality is that like most wars, there will be no winners. Russia has turned everyone against it, and the one or two friends it has left are not interested in jeopardizing their global standing to help them out. The European economy is going to struggle through a year of further disruptions. Ukraine has had a rough few years, but they'll be dealing with the repercussions long after they recover. Let's bring them back to their pre-2014 and 2022 situation though. How was their economy doing then? And what will this conflict mean for the country? And more importantly, its people in the years to come once we've answered these questions. Once that's done, we can put Ukraine on the Economics Explained national leaderboard. Even if the government had been able to sell them, they wouldn't have helped much. They attempted to relieve these issues by spending a lot of money which was just fueled off of their own money supply. If you hang around the channel for a little bit, then you should also know what happens when the government tries to fix a problem by printing lots of money. By 1996, the inflation rate was over 500% and they were forced to introduce a new currency, which they called. This was a challenge Ukraine just could not break its dependence on Russia, which was struggling at that time as well. This resulted in high levels of poverty in the 90s as a whole. Fortunately, by the 2000s things were starting to turn around. The country had had enough time to start integrating with the rest of the world. And it was able to start exporting natural resources and food to Europe and beyond its new more stable currency. You also allowed it to receive international investment, and that really helped when energy prices went down too. By 2007, just 8 years after the Russian financial crisis, the country had eliminated absolute poverty amongst its citizens. And even though it was still one of Europe's poorest economies, it had one of the fastest growing rates in all of Europe countries that are financially developing, not yet sophisticated enough to be advanced after 2008. They were in a vulnerable position and were very hard hit by the crisis. Ukraine was affected badly by the 2008 financial crisis, which hindered their growth. It will be difficult to find investors interested in putting money into ventures with high risks as well. And they'll often look to transfer any money they have in Ukraine, for example, to consolidate their finances back home. This economic exodus and reduction in trade had a huge, devastating effect on the economy. Within 1 year, the economy managed to shrink by over 30%, which was significant enough to seriously affect any developing country. Doing the whole exporting natural resources thing comes with some major downsides, like when the demand for those resources falls, they might not be as economical. No matter how well you manage other aspects of the economy, an advantage. China went through a massive stimulus which centered around building infrastructure. These projects helped get an economy going again, plus they'll save time and resources in the future. You're a historian, you should know better. It's one of the most clear examples of good versus evil that we've seen in decades. It doesn't mean he takes a bribe every time he knows something. Corruption is crucial to understanding how things work in Ukraine. Ignoring corruption will make it hard to come up with a plan for economic revival when this invasion ends. So you should already know that Ukraine is extremely corrupt. A lot of people think that Moldova is one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, and they rank alongside other countries like Brazil and Colombia. The next most important thing to understand is the scope and depth of their corruption on a macroeconomic level. There are two different types of corruption to look at. Corruption of theft is when someone steals or tricks money, such as through fraud or embezzlement. The second type is corruption of influence, and it's when an individual or organization will pay a bribe to get something like a government license. This is a small example of bribery. For instance, someone might want to let their car circulate on the streets, but might be short on cash, so they pay for a roadworthy certificate. It can also be big, like how governments were influenced by a company to vote in favor of an environmental law. However, corruption can be very damaging to the economy. It's important to keep a balanced approach and perhaps avoid encouraging unscrupulous tactics for a small fee. This is where government officials shake down businesses for cash or embezzlement. Is still 2, though it could be lower. Ukraine isn't a wealthy country. It hasn't had many opportunities to improve itself and its citizens given the circumstances that are mostly out of their control. We want to believe that Russia's invasion is not causing any turmoil, but it would be wrong to do so. As citizens, they are vulnerable and the situation hurts them. Keeping in mind the economic realities of this part of the world doesn't get people as excited or optimistic as hearing stories about the Ukrainian army sinking Russian ships or holding back tanks. But it might be more important to hear these things. Aggravating our minds with hatred towards Putin may not be the best thing to do. I know that sports are not solely about which team you're rooting for, but it's also about what your response will be in difficult times. The appropriate reaction should be sympathy and support. If you enjoyed today's video and would like to see similar videos, click on this video to the right. Or maybe this video to the left might be more interesting to you. Hope to see you all in the next video. Take care and remember, stay informed, stay prepared.